Greetings. Father Mark signing on with the next installment in the course on medieval history. Last time, we're continuing in this with the life of St. Augustine. So we left off in the year 408 with the execution of Stilicho, a Federati general, and an ethnic massacre of Federati wives and children, and the other Federati themselves joining Alaric, pledging their loyalty to him if he would lead them in revenge against Rome. At this point, the description of St. Jerome, another doctor of the church who lived through this, his description will assist us, once again taking the time on its own, the way the contemporaries understood it. He was writing in retrospect the next year, the year after Stilicho was executed. And in this, we see the description of a person witnessing the collapse of his society and state, and intelligent enough to recognize that. This is letter 123 in his collection. It is written to a widow, Ageruchia. He was writing to encourage her not to marry again. Her husband had died, and he was encouraging her not to marry again. Anyway, it's a long letter about a lot of things, but at number 16 is the one that'll, section 16 of the letter is one that'll help us understand the disintegration from the inside. Okay, quote, "I shall now say a few words about our present miseries. A few of us have hitherto survived them, but this is due not to anything we have done ourselves, but to the mercy of the Lord. Savage tribes in countless numbers have overrun all parts of Gaul. The whole country between the Alps and the Pyrenees, between the Rhine and the ocean, has been laid waste by hordes of Quadi, Vandals, Sarmatians, Alans, Heruls, Saxons, Burgundians, Alemanni, and Pannonians. The once noble city of Moguntiacum, that's present-day Mainz on the Rhine, has been captured and destroyed. In its church, many thousands have been massacred. The people of Vangium, after standing a long siege, have been extirpated. The powerful city of Reims, the Ambiani, the Altrabadi, the Belgians, on the skirts of the world, Tournai, Speyer, Strasbourg, have fallen to the Germans, while the provinces of Aquitaine and of the 9 nations of Lyon, of Narbonne, are, with the exception of only a few cities, one universal scene of desolation. And those which the sword spares without, famine ravages within. I cannot speak without tears of Tolosa, that's Toulouse in France, which has been kept from falling hitherto by the merits of its reverend bishop, Experius. Even the Spains are on the brink of ruin. I should say that, so in the Roman and Imperial maps, what is now the Iberian Peninsula of Spain, it was multiple provinces, so that's what he means, the Spains, plural, Hispania, nearer Spain, farther Spain. Even the Spains are on the brink of ruin, and tremble daily as they recall the invasion of the Cimbri. And while others suffer misfortunes once, in actual fact, they suffer them continually in anticipation. I say nothing of other places, that I may not seem to despair of God's mercy. All that is ours now, from the Pontic Sea to the Julian Alps in days gone by, once ceased to be ours. For 30 years the barbarians burst the barrier of the Danube and fought in the heart of the Roman Empire. Long use has dried our tears. For all but a few old people had been born either in captivity or during a blockade, and consequently they did not miss a liberty which they had never known. Yet, who will hereafter credit the fact, or what histories will seriously discuss it, that Rome has to fight within her own borders, not for glory, but for bare life, and that she does not even fight, but buys the right to exist by giving gold and sacrificing all her substance. This humiliation has been brought upon her not by the fault of her emperors, who were both most religious men, but by the crime of a half-barbarian traitor, who with our money has armed our foes against us. That's Alaric he's talking about. But now, even if complete success attends our arms, we can wrest nothing from our vanquished foes, but what we have already lost to them. Even what I have said is fraught with danger, both to me, who say it, and to all who hear it. For we are no longer free, even to lament our fate, and are unwilling, nay, I may even say it, afraid to weep for our sufferings. The year after Jerome wrote this letter, history changed. August 24th, 410, the sack of Rome began. Alaric kept his promise and to achieve vengeance. A traitor inside the city of Rome opened the Salarian Gate. If you go to Rome today, that it no longer exists. It was destroyed in a remodeling of the city in the 19th century. Anyway, it had existed, and it allowed Alaric and the Visigoths to enter the city. They plundered it for 6 days. St. Jerome, letter 127, written to Principia, a friend of his. Again, it's a long letter, has a lot of stuff in it, but number 12 is the salient section for us. Quote, "A dreadful rumor came from the west. Rome has been besieged, and its citizens forced to buy their lives with gold. Then, thus despoiled, they have been besieged again, so as to lose not only their substance, but also their lives. My voice sticks in my throat, and as I dictate, sobs choke my utterance. The city, which had taken the whole world, was itself taken. Nay, more famine was beforehand with the sword, and but few citizens were left to be made captive. In their frenzy, the starving people had recourse to hideous food, and tore each other limb from limb, that they might have flesh to eat. Even the mother did not spare the babe at her breast. In the night, Moab was taken. In the night did her wall fall down." This was the first time that the city of Rome was captured by foreign soldiers in 797 years. Strategically, it was insignificant, as the capital had long since been relocated. Nevertheless, the sack of Rome was a psychological blow from which the empire never recovered. It led to a revival of pagan writing, as many were quick to blame the outlawing of pagan religions as the cause of this disgrace. This is what prompted St. Augustine to compose his greatest work, The City of God. And it's not just me calling it the greatest work. So we find assistance in coming to terms with this work, The City of God, from Pope Benedict XVI. In a general audience in 2008, he explained in part, quote, "In the literary corpus of Augustine, more than 1,000 publications, divided into philosophical, apologetic, doctrinal, moral, monastic, exegetical, and anti-heretical writings. In addition, precisely to the letters and homilies, certain exceptional works of immense theological and philosophical breadth stand out. De Civitate Dei, that's the City of God, an impressive work crucial to the development of Western political thought and the Christian theology of history, was written between 413 and 426 in 22 books. The occasion was the sack of Rome by the Goths in 410. Numerous pagans still alive, and also many Christians, said, Rome has fallen. The Christian God and the apostles can now no longer protect the people. While the pagan divinities were present, Rome was the caput mundi, the great capital, and no one could have imagined that it would fall into enemy hands. Now, with the Christian God, this great city no longer seemed safe. Therefore, the God of the Christians did not protect. He could not be the God to whom to entrust oneself. St. Augustine answered this objection, which also touched Christian hearts profoundly, with this impressive work, De Civitate Dei, the City of God, explaining what we should and should not expect of God, and what the relationship is between the political sphere and the sphere of faith and the church. This book is also today a source for defining clearly between true secularism and the church's competence, the great true hope that the faith gives to us. This important book presents the history of humanity governed by divine providence, but currently divided by two loves. This is the fundamental plan, its interpretation of history, which is the struggle between two loves. Love of self, to the point of indifference to God, versus love of God, to the point of indifference to the self. To full freedom from the self for others in light of God. This, therefore, is perhaps St. Augustine's greatest book and is of lasting importance. Okay, so the sack of Rome, only 19 years after the abolition of paganism in the empire, well, at least outlawing of paganism, was taken as a vindication by many pagan thinkers who used the opportunity to insist on a causal connection between the Christianization of the empire and the capture of its founding city. Augustine issued this in serial form, in installment form, over a period of 13 years. He would often respond to questions written to him about earlier parts of the work in later parts of the work, and so that accounts for its extreme length, 22 books. Part 1 is thematically, the first 10 books are thematically linked, so that's part 1. Within that part, books 1 to 5 contain a critique of Roman history and behavior, showing that it certainly was not a moral paragon. It did not enjoy unalloyed happiness and bliss before the incarnation of Christ. Books 6 through 10 do the same as in terms of an analysis of pagan philosophy. So the first half of the first part, first 10 books, analyze alternative concepts of happiness in the Roman imperial tradition, Roman religion and Roman philosophy. In other words, pre-Christian religion, pre-Christian philosophy, and in which pre-Christian Rome equated happiness simply with the glory of the empire, with victory and conquest. In this, it succumbed, in Augustine's analysis, to demonic manipulation. They demons posed as gods, leading Rome to triumph, but in fact, morally ruined the population. And also, for those of you interested, books 8 through 10 contain a fascinating digression on Platonic demonology, how it was understood in the ancient world. The second part of the work consists of books 11 through 22. Those are thematically linked. Books 11 through 14 discuss the origin of the two cities, the city of God, and it's often, if you look this up in an encyclopedia, they'll probably say it's the city of God and the city of man. But Augustine never uses the term city of man. He calls it the earthly city. He does say city of God. That's the title of the work. But in the comparisons, it'll be the heavenly city versus the earthly city. Books 15 through 18 discuss history and progress, which is also fascinating. What about history did an educated 5th century man know? And that we get in these books. And books 19 through 22 talk about their destiny, soteriology and eschatology. Soteriology is the theology of salvation. Eschatology is the theology of the end times. So the history of the two cities, as Augustine, he begins with the creation of the world, and the defection of the devil, the defection of some of the angels, the rebellion of some of the angels, and the rebellion of the first humans, Adam and Eve. It continues with the providentially governed vicissitudes of the people of Israel, who also struggled against constant temptations of surrounding pagan religions. That's what all the prophets denounce, the backsliding, don't give in to these temptations. Books 15 through 17, supplemented by a survey of some of the concurrent secular history, particularly Rome. And then it ends with a discussion of eschatology and the fates of the two cities, either eternal damnation or eternal happiness. From evidence in Augustine's letters and from some of his other works, books 1 through 3 were completed and began circulating by September of 413. Books 4 and 5 by the spring of 415. Books 6 through 10 by 417, books 11 through 13 by the year 418, and the last books 14 through 22 were in circulation by the year 426. While Augustine had a specific reason to compose this book, the scope, depth, and complexity of the finished product created an entirely new discipline, the theology of history. It also provided the definitive Christian response to dualism. It did not end dualism, because people are going to believe, what they want to believe. And there's still dualists around today. So it didn't end it. But his articulation is normative for Catholics. His is the response to dualism. That the earthly and heavenly cities both have their origin in God and their final destiny in God. So the material world cannot be innately flawed, cannot be innately evil, because God created it. It can be misused, but that does not mean it's innately evil. Augustine accepted as axiomatic that all human beings desire what is good for themselves, though flawed perception can, and often does, lead them into a false notion of what that good is. Christians are called to work for the well-being of society in which they live, to the extent that they promote earthly peace for the sake of their citizens' true happiness. In practice, from Augustine's perspective, this meant furthering the Christian religion. So here is one example of Augustine reflecting on some of the emperors who became Christian. So this is City of God, Book 5, Chapter 24. This is just an excerpt, quote, "For neither do we say that certain Christian emperors were therefore happy because they ruled a long time, or dying a peaceful death, left their sons to succeed them, or subdued the enemies of the Republic, or were able both to guard against and to suppress the attempt of hostile citizens rising against them. These and other gifts or comforts of this sorrowful life, even certain worshippers of demons have merited to receive, who do not belong to the kingdom of God. And this is to be traced to the mercy of God, who would not have those who believe in him desire such things as the highest good. But we say that they are happy if they rule justly, if they are not lifted up amid the praises of those who pay them sublime honors, if they make their power the handmaid of his majesty by using it for the greatest possible extension of his worship, if, more than their own, they love that kingdom in which they are not afraid to have partners, if they are slow to punish, ready to pardon, if they apply that punishment as necessary to government and defense of the Republic, and not in order to gratify their own enmity, if they grant pardon, not that iniquity may go unpunished, but with the hope that the transgressor may amend his ways. If they compensate with the leniency of mercy and the liberality of benevolence for whatever severity they may be compelled to decree. If their luxury is as much restrained as it might have been unrestrained. If they prefer to govern depraved desires rather than any nation whatsoever. And if they do all these things, not through ardent desire of empty glory, but through love of eternal felicity, not neglecting to offer to the true God, who is their God, for their sins, the sacrifices of humility, contrition, and prayer. Such Christian emperors, we say, are happy in the present time by hope, and are destined to be so in the enjoyment of the reality itself, when that which we wait for shall have arrived. The most famous assertion in the City of God is Augustine's explanation of the two cities, the heavenly city and the earthly city. And he talks about this all over, so this is just one example. Book 11, chapter 1. The city of God, which we speak of, is the same to which testimony is borne by that scripture which excels all the writings of all the nations, by its divine authority, and has brought under its influence all kinds of minds. And this, not by a casual intellectual movement, but obviously by an express providential arrangement. For there it is written, "Glorious things are spoken of you, O city of God." That's a quote from Psalm 87. To this founder of the holy city, the citizens of the earthly city prefer their own gods, not knowing that he is the God of gods, not of false, of impious, or proud gods, who being deprived of his unchangeable and freely communicated light, and so reduced to a kind of poverty-stricken power, eagerly grasp at their own private privileges, and seek divine honors from their deluded subjects, but of the pious and holy gods, who are better pleased to submit themselves to one than to subject many to themselves, and who would rather worship God than be worshipped as God. Okay, note, some of this may sound... So Augustine believed that the pagan gods were in fact demons, masquerading as deities, in order to prevent humanity from perceiving the truth. So not all the fathers of the church, like other fathers like Tertullian, just, oh, well, they're false gods. They're just completely made up, the literary constructs, they're nothing. But Augustine believed the entities did exist. They weren't gods. He believed they were the fallen angels, the demons, who convinced, deluded humanity, as he said, into believing that they were deities, so that they would be worshipped instead of the true God be worshipped. Okay, further, the City of God, Book 14, chapter 28. Accordingly, two cities have been formed by two loves. The earthly, by the love of the self, even to the point of contempt for God. The heavenly, by the love of God, even to the contempt for self. The former, in a word, glories in itself. The latter glories in the Lord. For the one seeks glory from men, but the greatest glory of the other is God, the witness of conscience. The one delights in its own strength, represented in the persons of its rulers. The other says to its God, "I will love you, O Lord, my strength." For they were either leaders or followers of the people in adoring images, and worshipped and served the creatures more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. But in the other city, there is no human wisdom, but only godliness, which offers due worship to the true God, and looks for its reward in the society of the saints, of holy angels, as well as holy men, that God may be all and in all. And that's a reference to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And so, by means of the City of God, Augustine provided the definitive Christian response to dualism. He explained the relationship of the person to the state and of the state to the faith. And he etched into the consciousness of the medieval mind an authentic theology of history to guide correct living. The fundamental pastoral point made by Augustine as the empire disintegrated is that Christians live in this world, but they are not of this world. They are present here as strangers, sojourning in a foreign country, enjoying the blessings the world has to offer morally, but always ready to move on to heaven. So in our review of church history in the Middle Ages, we will encounter those who succeeded as well as those who failed to live up to these ideals. Yet these ideals were known. They were understood by all, and they were understood as having been articulated by Augustine. And therefore they give us a reasonable standard by which to accept the people of the medieval world on their own terms. In 429, well, actually, yeah, I better stop. So we'll pick up with this next time. Thank you for your attention. This session is adjourned.